again to all those who have nurtured us, all those we have nurtured. So many people in our lives that we don't even know we have touched. We probably recognize those who have touched us, but I wonder if we can even begin to recognize those we might have touched without even thinking about it too much. Do you ever wonder why somebody comes to mind that you haven't thought of in 30 or 40 years? All of a sudden they're right back in your mind. Sometimes, we just sort of throw that away, say that, oh, that's nice, I wonder what they're doing. My spiritual hunch is that they entered our mind so that we could pray for them at that moment. And they entered our mind specifically because we are the only one who can create the prayer that that person needs at that particular moment. You are the only one that can make that request, that can say that prayer for this particular person in that particular moment. Much better than just throwing it away. I wonder taking a look at my yearbook, see what so-and-so is doing. The theme for this month is wisdom, one of the 12 powers. And one of the things that's important to remember about the 12 powers, or really any other kind of spiritual gift, is that it's not out there someplace. The book isn't called The 12 Powers and How to Get Them. The book is simply called The 12 Powers, and remember that you've already got them. Because if we keep looking out there for it, we're never really going to find it in here, are we? No matter what it is we're looking for. When I first started doing this, I thought that, wisdom seems so ethereal, so otherworldly, so kind of out there, sort of beyond my human nature, beyond my human experience. It's associated with mystics and saints and really old people. I say really old because I'm getting close to that one, all right? We usually think about Solomon when we think about religious and spirituality, about wisdom. Interesting thing about Solomon, God appeared to Solomon before he was made king or emperor and said, Solomon, I'll give you anything you want. And Solomon said, I want wisdom. And God said, because you have chosen wisdom, I'll give you everything else. I'll give you riches, I'll give you power, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. But the real interesting thing about it was that he had to be wise enough to pick wisdom. Because if he was stuck in his material needs, he would have been asked for something like that. You have to be pretty wise to ask for wisdom in the first place. And that's a really good reflection for me to understand that you've already got it. Like Ramesi talked about last week, you've already got it, but you've got to claim it, you've got to demand it as being yours. Because unless you don't, it's just going to be something that sits up on the mantelpiece and looks like a very nice, neat little prize you've got, but it isn't the truth of who you are unless you claim it as being yours. Years ago, by the way, when I say years ago, when anybody my age says years ago, that could either be 2 or 50. Or 60. or 70. Or 80. Another lifetime, I was working as a therapist in an alcohol and drug treatment center. And it was right around the time when guided imagery was just catching on into the mainstream. It had been used by psychiatrists and psychologists for a while, but it sort of came in mainstream sort of thing. And we invented this little imagery that we used to do with our groups, especially the first time the group would meet. And it was called the wise person on top of the mountain. And what we would do is we would ask the group, each individual in the group, to pick a question that they were really seriously searching for an answer for, and they didn't have it yet. And then we would take them on this inner journey through this jungle, through this forest, and finally reach this mountain. And we'd have them crawl up the side of the mountain. Sometimes they would have bloody knuckles on their hands in their imagination. And they would come up to the top of the mountain. There would be a cave there, and there would be this wise person sitting outside the cave. And they could ask this wise person any question they wanted to, and they would ask the question, and then they would wait in silence for the answer. And then we would guide them sort of back down the mountain again. What was absolutely so fascinating is that practically every question that they asked had an answer. And they would share their question and their answer in the group, and we would kind of pat one another on the back for doing that. And then right towards the end we'd say, now where did that answer come from? And they say, well, the wise person on the mountain. I say, yeah, but who invented the wise person on the mountain? And all of a sudden you could see this look of awareness that wasn't there before. You have to remember these people were tremendously wounded with addictions and didn't know where they were going, probably didn't know what was coming next. And so they had very, very little self-esteem, very, very little awareness of who they truly are. And here was this moment of truth. All of a sudden I realized that wisdom, the answer to that question that I've been looking for so hard, so long, so fast, it's right here. Right here. And it's been there all along. You have within you a wise voice guiding you to express the highest aspects of your nature. Listen to this still small voice, which is manifesting your potential always. It has only one desire, and that is for you to remember the essential spark of the divine that exists within you. I don't feel very wise sometimes when I get to the top of the stairs and I wonder what I went up there for. But see, wisdom is not about that. Wisdom is not about feeling. It's not about remembering. It's a much deeper truth. It's what we carry around inside of us sometimes without even realizing it. It's the ability to see things differently, to see the newness of them, to see beyond appearances. Because you see, with wisdom, when I'm aware, when I'm conscious of it or not, I can respond to life situations reflexively, what I call robot mode. And we know when we're doing that. Or, well, sometimes we know when we're doing that. Might take a while. I don't know about you, but sometimes I go through a whole week in my life. And I did all the things I was supposed to be doing, but I wonder, where was I? Because I wasn't there. I wasn't present. I didn't even realize I had a choice to be present. But see, being in the flow, being past that robot mode, is real wisdom. It's not talking about it, it's being it. Like any other spiritual gift. It's not out there, it's in here. The story of Gandhi one time, he was traveling by train, leaving the station, and a reporter who had been dogging him for a long period of time went running after the train, finally yelled through the window and said, "Gandhi, what is your message?" And Gandhi grabbed a piece of paper and scribbled on it real quick and threw it out the window. And the reporter picked it up and found it. The little note said, "My life is my message." That's my truth. And you know that's true for each one of us too. And so it might be wise occasionally to ask yourself, or ask myself, is that the message I really want to get across? If my life is my message, which it is that the message I really want to speak to God, to myself, to other people, to the universe? When I was being therapized a number of years ago, I did that a couple of times. Some of it took, some of it didn't. Most of it took, though. That's why I'm still here. But I remember my therapist said, there's only one thing that I will not let you get away with. And that is if I ask you a question and you say, I don't know. Because you do. No matter how difficult or painful it might happen to be, for you to reach down in that muck and mire of what you're holding on to and pull that thing out, you always know the answer to your question. It is never, I don't know. And I found that extremely helpful and extremely challenging, no matter how uncomfortable it made me. but it put the ball in my park. You can never use "I don't know" as a cop-out. At least I couldn't do that anymore. And I still find myself saying that today sometimes. And I hear his voice in the back of my head saying, "Sorry, kid. That's one thing we're not going to accept. When you say I don't know, you do know. It might be hurtful, it might be painful, it might be difficult for you to fathom, to get to the truth of it, but there it is. And I'll bet you when you find it, it will be healing for you, as difficult as it might seem." I can't tell you the number of people come up to me after a sermon sometimes and say, "I felt like you were talking just to me." And I said, "Well, that's very nice, but really what happened, I'm just talking to myself. You just happen to be joining in the conversation." And it doesn't mean that I know something that you don't, because the reason why you resonate with something I might say, Ramisi might say, Bobby might say, whoever might happen to be up here, is because the truth of that already exists inside you. That's what clicks. It's only in your mind that you think it's something new. It's simply awakening again to a truth or reality that always exists inside you. Always. Wisdom is there already. Course in Miracles reminds us that you teach what you want to learn. What a great piece of wisdom. You find out what you're trying to get across to somebody else, or even what you object to or what you struggle with about somebody else, and you will begin to recognize it's something that you need to know for yourself. It's not as if we're getting wisdom from someone or something else. It's within you. It's not in a book, it's not in a sermon. What a book does or what a sermon does, it reminds us of what we already know. True wisdom comes from tapping into the source. That can happen any... You know, what enlightens you? What feeds your soul? It could be music, it could be poetry, it could be something you write, it could be something you read, it could be exercising, it could be playing with the cat, it could be 9 billion different things. Whatever you do, can you do that consciously with love and know that whenever you are feeding your soul, you are essentially feeding and touching your wisdom. And it can happen all over the place to anyone or anything. No matter where you are looking, you can find it. The Nobel laureate in physics, Richard Feynman, said, "The goal was a mental flash, achieved somewhere below consciousness. In these ideal instants, one did not strain toward an answer as much as relax toward it." For a piece of 12-step literature, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought or decision. We relax. What used to be a hunch or an occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. We begin to make it a habit. It's there all of it. From a Nobel laureate to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and everything in between is a reminder of what you already know. It's not about figuring something out. Not with your head, it's not with your intellect, not with your mind. You can know with your heart even when you don't know with your mind. Do you know that you are loved? How do you know you are loved? The mind cannot answer that question, but the heart knows. How do you know you love yourself? The heart knows. A friend of mine likes to say, God says everything will be okay. We just don't get to decide what okay looks like. In other words, I might not have a body in 5 minutes from now. It's still going to be okay. What that song that Lisa and Janet did this morning reminded me of a really deep truth around wisdom. And that is that wisdom by itself can be rather cold. That real true wisdom has to be united with love consciousness. It has to be united with compassion. If you have wisdom and no compassion, it turns into judgment. If you have compassion without wisdom, you might exhaust yourself in ways that are not healthy for you or anybody else. But wisdom with love is the way it really goes for each one of us. The Buddha called it the don't know mind. which is real interesting. It wasn't a place where there weren't any answers. There were so many answers to choose from that you didn't have to pick and choose. It was just right there being present to who you are. Emily Cady once said, the real wisdom is in your prayer of saying, God knows more than I do. I don't know the answer, God, show me. In other words, depending upon our divine consciousness to lead us through wherever it needs to go. In Buddhism, there's something called right speech. Questions we can ask ourselves. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? I wonder what it would be like if we asked those questions before we said anything, how much we wouldn't say. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? I remember a very wise man, Leo Biscaglia, one time did an experiment with one of his classes out in Berkeley. He covered both walls, 2 walls in his classroom, with brown paper. And he said, now what I want you to do on this wall over here, I want you to write down all the negative words you can think of. So the kids got a hold of that one. They wrote down all the dirty words they could think of, all the negativity they could think of, all over that wall. He said, now on this other wall, we want them to write down any positive words you can think of. He did the same thing on the other wall. And he said, okay, now that we've got that finished, from now on, this whole semester, we only use words on that side of the wall. We only use the positive word. He said, when we did that just for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, he said to a person, their whole attitude and outlook upon life changed. Simply because they changed their vocabulary. They changed the words they were using to something that was positive rather than something that was negative. And the wisdom to know the difference. The wisdom to know the difference. You get that one? The wisdom to know the difference. Socrates once said the true wisdom is when we realize how little we really understand about life. So the more I don't understand, the more I'm willing to know how much I don't understand, the more willing I am open to be understanding. To allow that to unfold for me, to unfold for you. He said all knowledge exists within the student, it just needs to be drawn out. One perceives to be learning, then is the recovery of what one has really forgotten. The teacher is just a midwife who draws forth what's already there. Those of you who are parents or work with kids, grandkids, kids, know that real teaching is not pounding something in, it's drawing something out. In fact, the word educare from the Latin means to pull out of or to draw out of rather than to pound into. We've kind of missed the boat on that one. But as a parent, as a teacher, what it would be like to recognize that true wisdom, first of all, it's already there. Compassion and wisdom are already there. And what I am doing is I am drawing that out. How do I know the wisdom or the thing that I'm listening to in my mind is coming from a higher source? I have a very simple question you can ask. Does it open my heart or does it close my heart? Does it push this person away or does it open myself up to be receptive of who and what they are? It's a real simple formula. But if you want to use it in terms of wisdom, judgment, or anything else, you can do it right away. Does this open my heart? Does it close my heart? Let me share a couple of ideas I'd like to close with this morning. What would my life be like if from this moment on I listened to my heart and embraced only what was loving in my thoughts and in my actions? What would that be like? What would my family be like? What would my world be like? What would it be like if as soon as I realized I became conscious of thoughts of anger and impatience, vulnerability, annoyance, or helplessness, that my holding on to these things, as justified as it might seem, that I realized I had a choice, either to hold on to these lower vibration energies or to choose what is higher? What if I realized that every negative thought added to the negativity of the planet, including my own? I could see peace instead of this. The wisdom of the heart moves beyond and deeper than the thinking mind. It asks questions such as, will this open my heart or close it? Will it add to the love in the world or the chaos? Am I expressing the God in me or something else? Will I ask someone I love to sit in this negative energy that I've created? What would love do? The opportunities to raise and to rise are infinite. One of the wisest, wonderful compliments I ever received in my life came from a child. Our middle granddaughter came up to Margot one day, and she said, Marmee, that was what they call her, Marmee. Marmee, is Grandpa Gerry a real grown-up? Thank you, God. May all beings be at peace. May all beings be free of suffering. And may all beings remember who they are. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day.